This is part 2 of a Tycho crater. We're about 1.3 kilometers from the surface. You'll see a very large town happening here. You'll see the large towers, shadows, rectangular structures. Again, this has been blurred by NASA. All evidence of ancient civilizations. We've got towers there. They're about 70 meters tall. We'll then zoom into one other area. We've got a very tall building happening here, which is about 120 meters of shadows, many towers in groups, square excavations, walls, towers, all blurred by NASA. This is a bit less blurred. You'll see the towers sticking up there about 100 meters, shadows, buildings. This obviously was a very large structure, so it's been heavily blurred. But you can see the towers there, the walls, that large structure there, shadows. So again, after learning how to spot these, it's easy to tell this was a very, very tall and big structure happening in this area here. Again, we've got a very large concentration here, towers, shadows. Square areas, towers on the canyon edge, about 50 meters high. These are a group of towers and buildings here. There's an obvious tower there, buildings which all, some are blurred, and most are blurred, some are not. We have a group there, excavation, walls, 50 meter high towers. Inside the canyon we've got towers, walls and buildings about 70 meters tall. Shadows from the towers. This area has been blurred as well by NASA. We'll see towers about 50 meters tall and buildings. There's one large tower there down the bottom. That's a group of towers that's been blurred, and rectangles are building structures. You'll see the rectangles and square structures happening in this area, the towers. This has been heavily blurred, this area. Heavily blurred, again, same sort of images. Towers, walls, structures. There's one very bright white tower there, shadow. Excavation there. We'll see a little area that looks like there's green vegetation. You'll see the slight tint of green in the landscape. It's very, very small in Tycho, but in Mare Moscoviense, which was an old lava flow, it's very, very dense vegetation there. And very dark green in certain areas. Here there's could possibly be very light. We have a city on the edge of the mountain here. Towers happening, square walls. There's two towers there with shadows. We'll have large tower there, a building there. This area contains a lot of buildings which have been blurred. It's a common feature again to have the towers on the edge of the crater, so you can see they've been blurred out. There's one tower there with a shadow. Twin towers, 60 meters high. That's these ones here to the right. And again underneath you'll see areas of buildings and walls. We're about 2.5 kilometers high up now. You can see evidence of structures there, zigzag walls. We have a building here in the corner in this cavity. It's about 200 meters wide. It's rectangular. There's a rectangle area there. Shadows. It's been blurred as well. Again, it was a thriving population down there. You'll see this is very hard to work out. Some are very clear to be seen, and the others are very blurred, and you have to use your imagination. Obviously, here we've got towers. Here we've got 3 there. Towers are about 90 meters. They're the largest ones. Twin towers there are buildings. There's a group of 4 towers, very tall, rectangular walls, square, towers there, shadows. Again, it all looks very eroded, and we can't tell how old it could be because there's no effects of heavy rain or wind like on Earth. We see groups of towers happening here, about 110 meters high, which have been blurred. Shadows. We have a strange structure there, which has got shadows as well. And there's a group of towers here which have been blurred. A little area here with square buildings, courtyards. Remnants of towers, but this is heavily eroded. There's not much happening here, so there's not much reason for blurring. A little bit of tint of light green coming in there as well. We're just jumping into Amari Moscoviense. That's the dense green in the canyons in this other side. Amari Moscoviense. And this shows more towers, but we'll jump back to the Tycho crater and zoom into that area towards the end. We've got towers and buildings happening in this canyon. Many towers on the edge of this canyon here. Square buildings have been blurred, censored inside the canyon as well. Generally, the common thing is the towers on the edge of a canyon or a crater. We see the towers there, very bright and white. Obviously, in this area here, there was a very large building. It's been cut into the rock face as well. It's been blurred. It seems that there's an ancient river that could have been flowing this area. Here we see towers happening, excavations, squares, rectangles, more towers here on the edge, which have been blurred, all down the edge of that crater. Many towers here. There's a whole row down the edge, square structures. I'll quicken the zooming unless we hit something that's interesting to talk about. That's a large area of square and excavations happening, shadows, towers. Two towers there, walls, shadows, square objects, again blurred. This area is very blurred, but again you can see the towers and square structures. And many towers and square structures here as well, and 2 big towers there. We see 1 tower on its own and 2 next to it. And there's 1 tower there as well. And shadows. One large tower, square, a building. Excavations happening in this area. Large towers here that have been blurred. Towers, square, are buildings cut into the walkways in the rock face. It looks eroded, so it's very hard to estimate the age. White towers, white buildings, rectangles, walkways. Two large towers on their own. There's shadow, they're about 90 meters. A little bit of excavation happening in this area. This area is a bit clearer. You'll see the towers on the edge have been blurred, that one there. And this area has been heavily blurred. So obviously there was a fair bit of formation in that area. We'll see the edges of all the towers on the edge of the crater. Area of blurring, obviously there were towers up in there. It's been blurred by NASA. There's a few rectangular buildings. That was one large tower. You can see the shadow. That's all been blurred. You can see the wall structures there. The towers there as well. You'll see the towers happening in this area here, in blurred areas. Fairly large towers here, blurred areas. Squares, rectangles. Fairly large towers there, about 80 meters. This area has a tint of green on the landscape as well. This has been heavily blurred, censored, so obviously there's a fair amount of towers happening here and buildings. Twin towers, we've got a rectangular structure there. On the edge, you'll see walls, blurred images, excavation there happening. It seems as though the walkways are actually cut into the rock face. This is a bit clearer. You'll see the towers there, group of 3, shadows, rectangular areas or walkways, courtyards. Here we've just got a tower on its own. There, it's about 80 meters, bright white, shadow.